Good afternoon. From that rapturous welcome, I don't think I have any role to play here. Hello, Thuli. Good to see you. We're really happy to have Thuli Madonsela with us this afternoon. Professor Madonsela. Thuli doesn't really need an introduction. The university, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, actually conferred an honorary doctorate on Thuli Madonsela. So she actually has a formal association with the University of Cape Town. So it's nice to welcome you back, Thuli. She's been described as many different things. I think the description that I like best of Thuli is the anti-corruption whisperer. Because as you'll find out, Thuli is she's very soft-spoken, but that shouldn't fool you. Whereas other people shout truth to power, Thuli actually whispers truth to power. She's also got a knack for a turn of phrase. I mean, I'm sure that you're sort of familiar with many of the reports that Thuli authored as public protector, with catchy titles like Secure in Comfort, which was the investigation into Nkandla. I like the one which was about what was happening at Prasa, which was called Derailed. And then, of course, the most recent, and I suppose probably one of the most significant reports of Thuli, which we've seen played out every day in our media, the Zonda Commission, was the state of capture. And it's no exaggeration to say that the work that Thuli did has really deepened, strengthened, and entrenched our constitutional democracy, and played no small part in the changes that we saw, and certainly was a factor in the resignation of a president. So it's not surprising then that Thuli was recognized as one of the most influential people by Time magazine in 2014. So we're very happy to have you here, Thuli. I know you're now in the chair at Stellenbosch and Constitutionalism and Social Justice, I think. Thuli is going to speak to us about ethical governance, constitutionalism, and I think the sort of vexed issue that many of us are also preoccupied with, the issue of property rights and land rights. So Thuli, welcome, and we look forward to your talk.
Wonderful. Can you help me? Thank you, Dr. Russell. Thank you, UCT. It's an absolute privilege to join you. You can. Okay, I've just only said thank you to Dr. Russell and thank you to UCT. It's an absolute privilege to join you this afternoon. Is this not working? Oh, yes, sorry. Okay. It's an absolute privilege to join you this afternoon, and it's heartwarming to see ordinary citizens having an interest in issues of ethical governance. It was Plato who said that people get the democracy they deserve. And obviously, the price we pay for lack of vigilance is democracy derailed. I want to engage you this afternoon on the issue of ethical governance and constitutionalism. And as you can see, my first topic is who derailed our democracy? And it's something that I find to be a constant dinner conversation. Everyone concerned about who derailed our democracy. Why are things not the way we expected them to be at the dawn of democracy about 25 years ago? Why have things changed? Why is there so much corruption? Why are we not making headway on ending poverty and inequality? Why is service delivery not up to the standard we expect it to be? For example, why are we fighting over a few schools that are doing well when about 75% of the schools are not doing well? Why are the other 75% schools not doing what we expected them to do? When we started the journey to democracy around 1994, we thought 25 years later, which is now, things would be looking differently. But whenever I hear this conversation, when people are complaining about this and that, I'm reminded of a book by Spencer Johnson, Who Moved My Cheese? And Spencer Johnson talks about a colony of mice and people when all of them found some cheese and they were enjoying it, and they started thinking it was their cheese. And one day the cheese was gone. The mice went away to look for other cheese. One of the small people went away, and I think it was Ho who went to look for food, for cheese somewhere else, and ham stayed hemmed inside the maize where the cheese was gone. And there's no guessing who ended up cheeseless. It's the one who didn't go for cheese. And interestingly, though, Spencer Johnson has written a follow-up book, which my son was reading on the way here. It is Out of the Maze. And I thought, wow, that's the book that every South African should read now. Out of the Maze. How do we get out of this maze? How do we find the cheese that we thought belonged to us? And what are we going to do? And that's Spencer Johnson's book, which is what are we going to do beyond analyzing what went wrong, which we do a lot. Well, we also do good things, I know, and that's why you're here, is because you already are doing things. Okay, if we're going to talk about ethical governance and constitutionalism, I thought maybe we could just quickly look at the terminology. And the Oxford Dictionary defines ethics as the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conduct of an activity, while the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary says ethics refers to a system of accepted beliefs that control behavior. I like the one that moves ethics away from morality, because when we talk about morality, often people confuse morality with religion, because there can be morality outside religion, but to steer away from religion, I would say ethics is a system of accepted beliefs that control behavior. And there is something that worries me, though, sometimes when we think about ethics, when people think it's only ethical if the code of ethics says so. The reality is some codes of ethics are too narrow. Just think about Nazi Germany during the rule of the Nazis. Whatever doctors and lawyers and judges did was acceptable then, was allowed by the laws then. But it was still unethical. When Judgment Day came, they were judged by what is universally ethical, that, for example, life is sacred and they were not supposed to take life. If you're a doctor and you had signed or you had taken the hypocritical oath, not hypocritical, you had signed to preserve life and not to destroy life. Yeah, during apartheid, some people are now being tried for what they did, which seemed accepted under the laws then, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission also provided a platform for people to self-disclose and move forward. Governance. The Oxford Dictionary defines governance as the action or manner of governing a state or organization, while the Cambridge Dictionary defines governance as the way that organizations are managed at the highest level and the system of doing this. And I prefer the Cambridge definition because it looks at the way organizations are governed at the highest level or managed at the highest level, but plus the systems, because governance is both what people do in terms of making rules and applying rules, and the systems they devise for governing or managing those organizations. And what is constitutionalism? Again, the Oxford Dictionary defines constitutionalism as adherence to a constitutional system of governance. You will note here it's not adherence to the Constitution, it's adherence to a constitutional system of governance, because you can adhere to the Constitution, to the letter, not the spirit of the Constitution. Some of the people that the Constitutional Court and other courts have given fines for bad behavior, former Minister of Social Development, Ms. Matabile Dlamini, among others, were fined, but they operated through the Constitution in terms of litigation. The Constitution allows you to do that. But the courts fined them. And later I will tell you, for example, that not everything that is lawful is ethical. Sometimes there could be a discrepancy between law and ethics. In fact, at times there's even a discrepancy between law and justice. And we know under apartheid, for example, that we had a lot of laws that were laws, but they were unjust. And hence the journey of a constitutional governance also included reducing that gap between law and justice. So ethical governance, therefore, is the action of governing an organization or state in a manner that appreciates and consistently does the right thing the right way. Ethical governance fosters constitutionalism. In other words, if there are no ethics, people are not going to conform to constitutionalism. They will apply the letter of the Constitution, but not the spirit of the Constitution. And for a country or organization to be governed properly, you don't want people to hide under technicalities. Those of you who may have been involved in court cases, you would have been involved in a case where, on a technicality, somebody won a case. But justice was miscarried and ethics were lost. I dealt with a case like that once in the Eastern Cape where Mr. and Mrs. G were ordinary people like many people in this room, hard-working business people, and they were in the business of building homes. They were in the construction business, and at some stage, they subcontracted with a bigger company to build homes for the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. Mr. and Mrs. G built the homes. When they had finished the walls and there was no roof, the municipality informed them that it had run out of money and that the money will arrive in the next tranche, and they were informed verbally or orally to proceed, not in writing, to proceed and and build the roof, what is called a top structure in construction. They did the top structure and they delivered. And the municipality was happy, took those homes and delivered them to people. You know how governments do when they're delivering homes. They find a Gogo Dlamini who looks very cute, and they bring the media and they give the Gogo Dlamini the keys, and everyone feels we are delivering and the smiles in our faces. They did just that. Then Mr. and Mrs. G came to ask for the money for the top structure. And government didn't say, we don't owe you. Government simply said, we don't know you, legally speaking. And government's argument for saying we don't know you was that, one, you are a subcontractor, therefore we don't have a contract with you. So legally, you have no local standi or leg to stand on in court. Didn't say we didn't owe you, we didn't give away those houses. And then the second argument that a government said was, we didn't ask you in writing to proceed and build those roofs. We asked you, but the contract said everything must be done in writing. And Mr. and Mrs. G asked the main contractor, and usually the main contractor is often a suitcase person who has no means. They just got the contract and they passed it on to you. So they don't want to sue because they've chowed what they got. So Mr. G, they went to court, and the court of law agreed with government that the government does not know Mr. and Mrs. G. So law was fulfilled. And in a narrow sense, you could even say that would be in the confines of the Constitution. But was it within the confines of constitutionalism and ethical governance? The matter then came to the Power Protector. Mr. G went to our offices in the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape office said, well, we can't help you because a court has spoken. And when we went there for stakeholder consultations, Mr. and Mrs. G came to us and appealed to me and Deputy Public Protector Kevin Malunga. And we listened to this case and we said, well, the court was right in terms of the court's mandate. But our own people were wrong because our mandate and that of the court are not the same. We don't investigate contractual infringements. We investigate maladministration and improper conduct in state affairs. And our inquiry was what happened? What should have happened? In other words, was there improper conduct? And improper conduct in state affairs is when there's a discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened. So we'd say what happened? What should have happened? Is there a discrepancy between the two? And if there's a discrepancy, does it amount to improper conduct? Sometimes you can have a justifiable discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened. And then we then look at, was somebody prejudiced by that improper conduct? And in this case, we said, what happened? This man was asked to build houses. What should have happened? He should have been paid. Why was he not paid? Because the money given by national government to the municipality for the building of RDP housing had been used for other things. Well, you get that. You get that thing where money is meant to be used in terms of Section 237 of the Constitution, which says constitutional priorities should be given, constitutional responsibilities should be given priority and performed diligently. No, sometimes officials don't do that. They take the money and use it for frivolous things, for tenders that are not even necessary. For example, they could take this money and go and go for a tender for pads for girls, for sanitary pads. I'm not saying sanitary pads are not important, but if there's money that was meant for something else, you're not going to do that. But often they do that because the tenders that have a quick turnaround time also have very huge responsibilities or opportunities for kickbacks. But in this case, then we said, okay, so what should have happened is that you should have paid and you should have used the money that was given you by government for the purpose it was given. But because you did something wrong, somebody was prejudiced. So maladministration and prejudice. And the last question was always, how do we place the complainant or whoever has been impacted negatively as close as possible to where they would have been but for the wrongful conduct from government? And our answer was, you did what you're not supposed to do, including the giving of instructions verbally. It is the duty of people in government, in terms of Section 195 of the Constitution, to operate properly, to follow the rules. I can't break the rules and then you operate with me not knowing that I'm breaking the rules, and then I give myself the benefit of my own wrongful conduct. But anyway, in this particular case, we then said they must pay. And they quickly said they were going to pay. And we were very happy. They wrote to us, and yes, we did exactly that, ma'am. My team jumped because we used to actually applaud, literally like little kids, whenever somebody's money has been released, a whistleblower has been put back to their job and things like that. We did just that until the mayor changed. So the mayor who had just given us that okay in writing, the municipal manager had given us that okay in writing and given us that they would pay within 30 days. Then the mayor changed in that period of preparing for elections. The mayor changed. And they wrote us another letter that says they're not going to pay. They tried to call the mayor. We tried to, because some people think that it's better to look like you're doing the right thing than to do the right thing. So people often do the wrong thing to manage the optics, and in order to look to society as if they're doing the right thing. So in this case, they wanted to hide. We're going into the municipal elections in 2016. They wanted to hide that they had treated somebody shabbily. And anyway, then they refused to pay, and we were very sad. And when that mayor didn't make it during the local government elections, we didn't shed a tear. Right. Why ethical governance and constitutionalism matter? Why do we care? You probably already realize that when ethics fail, governance fails. And when governance fails, things fall apart. And we then all get affected when governance fails. Whether we're governing or we're not governing, we are affected. If ethics are so important, where's the ethics playbook? Where do we find information? Because often people say ethics are relative. What I think is right and wrong is different from what you think is right and wrong. But I think there are ethical issues that are universal. Thou shalt not steal. I don't know a single culture that says you can steal. A single religion. Well, thou shalt not lie. I don't know any religion that says you can lie. Of course, there are what they often refer to, though, as ethical dilemmas. Ethical dilemmas is when it's very, very dicey and you're not sure what to do. For example, I was told a story recently by Judge King, who was just telling us the story, Professor King now, was telling us a story about one experience or a hypothetical case where you're a bank manager. Your bank is about to close. You've just been told by headquarters, you are here in the Western Cape, you've just been told by headquarters that your bank is going to be liquidated and staff is going to be retrenched in the next 2 months or so. And in the bank is your brother-in-law, your sister's husband, who's just been promoted in the past month, he comes to you to authorize the extension or the expansion of his mortgage. Because now that he can afford more, he wants to remortgage his house because he can afford to pay the higher mortgage. But you know he's going to be jobless in the next month or two. The rule is you're not supposed to share confidential information with anyone, number one. The second part of the bank rules are you're not supposed to prefer any member of staff above others. So what do? It's an ethical dilemma, isn't it? I gave this ethical dilemma to two Mal Foundation ambassadors recently. We have a foundation that deals with democracy, literacy, and leadership. And part of the course they have to attend is a course called Epic Leadership, leaders that are ethical, purpose-driven, impact-conscious, and committed to serve. Diane here actually attended. It was amazing the kind of answers that the young people provided around how do you deal with ethical dilemmas. Sometimes it's not a choice between doing the wrong thing and doing nothing. Sometimes you can find things in between. In fact, the one person who came up with something interesting came up with the idea that he would just sit on it. He wouldn't lie to his brother-in-law and say, yeah, okay, and sign. He wouldn't tell him the truth because he's forbidden from telling the truth. He would just sit on it. But what does that mean? For me, I liked that answer. It was provided by a young fellow who's a teacher. And I like the fact that he's a teacher and he's a leader of a new union that has been started. It's not STAT2, it's a different union of teachers. I liked his answer because it said to behave ethically, you should give away the desire to be liked. Because if you want to be liked all the time in your life by everyone, you can't behave ethically because you always want to people please. So in this case, obviously, whilst you're still sitting on your brother-in-law's application, you're not likely to be invited for dinner at your sister's house. Or should you be accidentally invited to another place where everyone else will be there, the look you're going to get from your sister and from your brother-in-law is not going to be a kind one. And if they whisper to everyone in the family, you'll start seeing everyone give you that look that says you're not a good person and you're not a good family member. However, in South Africa, we really do have a lodestar for ethics. It is the Constitution, particularly Section 1, which gives us a vision of society that we're trying to build, one where everyone's life is improved and everyone's potential is freed. And it is a society that is open. It is a society that is based on constitutionalism, or where the Constitution is supreme. It is open and it is transparent. It is based on freedom for all and equal enjoyment of all human rights and freedoms by all. You'll find that in some of that in the Bill of Rights, and then the values you'll find in Section 1. The vision in the Constitution will also help you to map up where are we going, what kind of society are we building. Section 195 is specifically about values and principles to underpin the public sector. Everyone who works for government has to comply with Section 195, and one of those principles of public administration says that conduct in the public service should be based on the highest level of professional ethics, the highest level of professional ethics. Section 96 specifically deals with members of the executive, and they are required to be ethical. They are required to avoid a conflict of interest between their interests and the interests of the public. They are also required not to favor anyone when they exercise their powers, and two, not to use any of the information that they get through their work to advance themselves or others. Section 136 is similar to Section 95, but deals with MECs, members of the executive councils in provinces, and Section 237 is rarely used, yet it's extremely important for ethics, because that's the one that talks about the need to give constitutional responsibilities priority. So, for example, when recently it was announced that President Zuma was going to get about 25 million or something like that to sing some songs, and this was in the public interest. Should somebody have taken this to court, they would have looked at, among other things, Section 237, to look at the total budget of the eThekwini municipality, the people who have no homes, the schools that have no infrastructure, the roads that lead to some of the kids there having what they call no school days. When it's raining, they have no school days because the roads are dilapidated and buses can't go through there. So the courts would look at that and say, you have this that the Constitution says you must do, and you have this that you want to do, and you're not allowed to do what you want to do before you've done what you must do. So that's a constitutional value. That's in Section 237. And then all of these are supported by the laws in this country that seek to advance constitutionalism. For example, when it comes to social justice as part of our ethical foundations, you'll find laws such as the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act and the Employment Equity Act. When it comes to ethics, you'll find codes of conduct around just generally ethics. When it comes to members of the executive, there's also the Executive Members Ethics Act, EMI. And then we have been saying, when I was public protector, that we need a universal code in government, just to make sure that we bridge the gap between what is truly ethical and what organizations choose to put in their codes of practice. For example, when I issued the report written A Course in Ethics, there was a gap between what is generally regarded as ethical and how the IEC understood conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, as understood, is when you have a soft spot for something and you are supposed to judge between that and what is in the public interest. And it doesn't have to be a financial interest. For example, if I'm judging something that involves somebody with whom I sit in a committee in my Stokvel, I'm likely to have a soft spot for that person. Or somebody who I sit with in church, somebody who I go to, we go to the same church. In this particular case, it was even worse. The parties concerned ran business A together, and then business entity B, where the IEC member was not a part owner, got a tender from the IEC. And the question was, should the IEC member have disclosed that this person is their business partner, even if they were a business partner in business B, not business A, and she didn't disclose. And their argument was that she had no financial interest in business B, she only had a financial interest in business A. I thought otherwise, and we looked at ethical considerations universally, including the OECD Code of Ethics, and we thought they were wrong. They insisted that we were wrong. The matter went to court after I issued A Course in Ethics, and the courts, up to the Constitutional Court, agreed with us. So But in the private sector, where do you find your ethics? Again, it's the laws, it's sector norms and organizational codes of conduct. But I did indicate earlier, though, that we must remember that what's lawful or permissible under the law, and even a code of conduct, may be unethical or wrong. For example, the organization might not prohibit discrimination, might not prohibit indirect discrimination, but you might find yourself, when you go to court, being said to be indirectly discriminating when you do certain things. So this is the architecture of governance in South Africa. If we're just trying to look for answers on ethical governance and constitutionalism, where do we look? We start with the Constitution, which gives us a vision of society, as I indicated. It gives us the values of that society, which include the value of the achievement of equality, freedom for all, and the promotion of human rights. We also have a Bill of Rights in that Constitution that protects certain human rights. Some of them are civil and political in nature, and some of them are social and economic in nature, including the right to access to food, the right to access to water, right to access to housing, right to access to education, and right to economic activity. After the Constitution, or the Constitution also provides in its architecture for governance a structural arrangement where we have the judiciary that adjudicates right and wrong. We have the executive that executes most of the things that have been decided in laws. And we have the legislature that designs the laws and then thereafter oversees to make sure that those laws are complied with. In South Africa, we have a fourth structure, and it's still a debate about whether in South Africa we have what is called the trias politica, which is legislature, executive, and judiciary. Or whether we really have moved away from the trias politica, we have a four-sided government. We have the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, and Chapter 9 institutions, because they're not part of the judiciary, they're not part of the legislature, they're not part of the executive, but they're there as a reinforcement of the oversight mechanisms in South Africa. The one mistake we make, though, having all of these, our policies, our laws, etc., is as a country, we have tended to focus on enforcement. I recently came back from a workshop or a conference organized by the Nobel Prize Foundation. And the session I participated in, one of the sessions I participated in was on learning to be human. And we all agreed that we need to place emphasis on the process of learning to be human so that the majority of people do things right most of the time, because it's the right thing to do, not because somebody's going to see them. And then we only have a few bad apples to deal with. But if you look at, for example, at the theater that is state capture right now, you're seeing that, the bad apples became systemic. And then you can't then have ethical governance when wrongdoing has been systematized, when the people in the system have been corrupted or compromised. And it becomes important to make sure that we teach ethics from cradle to grave, and not just through formal education, the books that we make sure that people read, the TV programs that are shown, the TV games that we allow our children to play, all of those shape our sense of being human, our understanding of right and wrong, and in the end, that will determine whether we'll have a state that is governed properly or not. So what's the state of ethical governance today? Well, my view is we have really a theater of systemic ethical governance lapses. And when we investigated allegations of state capture, we realized that what we were dealing with was the tip of an iceberg, and that there was a lot underneath, and hence our insistence that there should be a commission of inquiry. But, dear colleagues, you'll agree with me that Rome did not fall in one day. It was allowed to fall one piece at a time by looking the other way. So what we're seeing under the Zondo State Capture Commission is something that didn't even start in the so-called lost decade. People talk about the so-called lost decade under President Zuma. Yes, things got worse then, but we started looking the other way earlier. And I recall that Nelson Mandela several times warned us about the creeping problem of corruption. And so why ethical governance fails? John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls with leadership. And when you think about leadership, it's not leadership at the top, it's leadership from cradle to grave, and it's leadership from cleaner to president. In other words, leading ourselves, influencing ourselves, and inspiring ourselves to do the right thing is what we need to consistently do. And over the years, sometimes people have taken, or all of us have taken, the low road instead of the high road. And why do people take the high road? Partly because leadership allows it. I mean, if you look at the problems we've seen at SABC under Ben Ngubane, ESCOM under various leaders, you will see that top leadership at the level of governance, when governance fails, things fall apart. And one of the things that causes governance to fail, I said, is wanting to look good by doing wrong things. And that starts with leadership. Recently, I was told a story. It's a Jewish fable, although I have King Shaka there. It's a Jewish fable about a king who went around looking for a replacement. He didn't have sons. Well, he probably was sexist, or the culture of that community was such that only a man could be a king, because he went around looking for a replacement, for a successor, and he was looking for a young man. They found him 3 competent young people, and he just had to choose one of the 3. To make that final decision, he gave all of them 3 seeds to go and plant and get trees, and once the trees have borne fruit or yielded fruit, they must bring the fruits to him. All 3 went away. And they came back after 3 years, and the first one came and he had borne some fruit, or 2 of the trees had borne some fruit. And the second one came, and all of his trees had borne fruit, and he gloated about the fruits being the best in the land, and delivered the fruits to the king. The third young person came with nothing and said, "I'm sorry, my lord, I did the best I could to nurture the seed, and no fruit was born." Who do you think the king appointed as his successor? The first one? The last one? Yeah, I can see there's lots of wise people in this room. So your companies are, I can imagine that your companies are not those that are saying profit at all costs. I don't care how you do it, all I want is results. This king was not like that. Because that's what has killed companies. That's why we have Steinos in trouble. That's why we have Tiger Foods in trouble. And Tiger Woods too was in trouble. Yes. People get into trouble when they worry too much about getting to the top fast and getting to the top at all costs, because then you shoot up and you're going to come back like a house tumbling down. Okay, I had it. So at a personal level, people want to succeed. There's a need. So things fall apart because it starts with a need. I want to be successful. I want to be praised. I want to be a star. And therefore you cut corners. For example, bread is supposed to be 1 kg, but if you can sell 800 grams and pretend it's 1 kg, that means more profit for the company, and you'll be praised by your shareholders. Temporarily that works, but when the Competition Commission finally finds out, or the Consumer Commission finally finds out that you did something wrong, you're going to go to trouble. Auctioning, same thing. We need to make sure that our things are sold, and they're sold at a reasonably high amount. Why don't we fix it and have people who are bidding here until when the apple palm sees that there's something that is going wrong here, takes you to the right authorities, and you pay the hard way for doing wrong things. And again, another case of Wendy Apple Palm, the money lenders, you need to make a huge amount of money, and so that your shareholders are going to praise you, and you'll get promotion after promotion. And of course, you make poor people borrow money that they don't need, and you charge them exorbitant amounts until Wendy Apple Palm takes you to court and everything falls apart. So it starts from need, though, to greed. You need that promotion, or you need to belong. A lot of people I found who became part of wrongdoing at SABC, right up to the CEO, one of them offloaded to me. It was just the need to belong. That if I don't play along, I'm going to be kicked out. And I'm very old. To find another job is going to be tough because they do blacklist you. There's one whistleblower that we took back to work in the Northwest where by word of mouth they tell everyone that this is a snitch, and until we caught up with them. So people want